Let's bring back Teng Jianqun and Pavel Felgenhauer, our guests, to talk more about these sanctions. Mr. Teng, so let's start with you. How are these sanctions going to change the situation? Will they have much of an impact, the ones imposed on the individuals and then all these entities in Russia?
I don't think such a sanction against Russia will change the tendency of the development of the policy by the Russian government at this moment or in the future. Because according to our studies, in recent years, the United States and some other European countries have already imposed more than 100 rounds of sanctions against Russia. And of course, Russia has its advantage. For example, it has such a large territory and its agriculture is quite good. And also, Russia has a lot of oil and gas, and that should be a very important part for the country, for Russia to continue their development or continue the social life in every aspect. So this is actually a trick played by the Western countries just to show the determination to contain Russia and show the determination to fight against Russia.
Well, Mr. Felgenhauer, what's the view from Moscow then? Have there been any impact so far?
Well, of course, the sanctions are very damaging to Russia. That's a fact. Russia, of course, has not collapsed, and Russia is functioning. That is very much true. But Russia is not developing. For the last 10 years, Russia was practically not developing at all. There was no sustainable economic growth. Household incomes have been declining. They're not falling, but they've been declining. And this is going to get worse because it's not only financial sanctions, it's also technological sanctions. Many technological programs, civilian and military, have been stalled or postponed indefinitely because there's been technological sanctions on components and materials that Russia does not produce itself. And there's different estimates how much Russia lost in terms of GDP. And these new sanctions apparently will cause a loss of at least 1%, maybe 2%. That's not maybe catastrophic at all, but that means that Russia is not going to have very serious problems in further developing the country. And that inevitably, in the long run, will have political internal effects on the stability of the present Russian regime.
But of course, there'll also be a blowback from, on the countries who impose these sanctions. So, Mr. Teng, we've already heard some governments say how they're willing to shoulder the cost of these sanctions, especially like Germany, who rely on Russian oil and gas.
Of course, I think the European countries, especially Germany, have already suffered a lot from such a sanction by themselves. And this is a little bit trick policy by the United States, just to make some tensions in Europe, and so they can use sanctions against Russia, against some other countries, and completely change the market for Russia in Europe, including the oil and the gas. I think the European countries actually are under heavy pressure for its green development, and some countries like Germany already stopped their nuclear power development, and they would like to have more clean energy, including the gas from Russia. So this is actually a real damage, not only for Russia, but also for some European countries, especially for Germany.
Mr. Felgenhauer, do you think that Russia's attack of Ukraine will change how some European countries might consider joining NATO in the future, and if this will change the dynamic in the region?
Well, yes, that's happening. It happened actually beginning from 2014 when Russia reunited with Crimea. there has been the two Scandinavian neutral countries, Finland and Sweden, have been getting closer and closer to NATO. Their military are training together with the NATO militaries. If you go to NATO headquarters, you'll easily bump into a Swedish officer in uniform or a Finnish officer. And now there's political, apparently, movement in these countries that maybe they will join NATO, though that's not a foregone conclusion. And of course, Moscow is opposed to that and hopes that the traditional neutrality of these countries will continue. There is, of course, right now, their societies there and politicians are split on the issue, and Moscow hopes that the Scandinavian traditional neutrality will continue.
And how do you expect things to develop from now on, Mr. Felgenhauer? I mean, might there be a change of government in Ukraine, which seems to be what Russia wants out of this to stop the fighting, and just what will happen next?
Well, that is possible. Right now, there have been some skirmishes around Kyiv, and some even reports from Kyiv itself. Though apparently the attack on the city that was promoted by President Zelensky did not happen this night. But anyways, there's been problems around Kyiv. There could be the present government may flee, and if Russian forces go in, and maybe there'd be establishment of a new one. But this new government is going to have problems to take under control the entire country of Ukraine. And actually the old government may also have more problems as Ukraine begins to disintegrate to some extent. So no matter what government there will be in Kyiv, it'll have problem to control anything outside Kyiv. So that's also a very serious problem, the growth of regionalism in Ukraine and loss of centralized control.
And Mr. Teng, your thoughts on this question? Where do you think things will go from here?
Yeah, I think according to recent development, I'm sure President Putin at least has 3 stages planned to go ahead. First, to suspend the clash in eastern Ukraine, just because of the situation developed. For example, a lot of ammunition from the Western countries were there. That might be dangerous game played by the Western countries, and to encourage Ukrainian government to go ahead to challenge the security interests of Russia. This is the first step, that is to say, to suspend the clash in eastern Ukraine. And the second step is demilitarization of Ukrainian armed forces. This is actually attention or purpose for Russia to make neutralized or to central state in this region. And number 3 step is to just use military pressure to ask Zelensky to return to the negotiation table. According to the history, actually, during the wars in Afghanistan, in Chechen, the Russian troops would like to take the leaders as number 1 target. But this time, of course, Zelensky is a very important target for Russia, but no killing at this moment, just because they would like to use the military pressure to ask the current leader of Ukraine to return to the negotiation table and to make Ukraine as a centralized state in that region, not taking side position or policy by that country. So this is actually security concern, and Putin has already put the security his concern on the top agenda, and then the commercial interests in that region.
All right, well, gentlemen, thank you both so much once again. Really appreciate your time and your insights. That's Teng Jianqun with the China Institute of International Studies and Pavel Felgenhauer, Moscow-based defense analyst and columnist. Thank you.